She said at my daughter's graduation, "I'm not clapping for her. She's not even a my kid." My daughter was valedictorian and looking right at us. I said, "Then leave." She refused. So I stood up mid-ceremony, walked her out, put her in an Uber, and returned alone. When my daughter asked where she went, I, 44 male, have a daughter 18 from my first marriage. Her mom passed away when she was 6, breast cancer, caught too late. I raised my daughter mostly on my own for about 8 years before I met my wife. We've been married for 4 years, dated for about a year before that. I work as an HVAC service manager. Decent living, nothing fancy. My wife works part-time at a veterinary clinic doing front desk and billing. Between us, we pull in about $105,000 combined. I'm telling you the money stuff up front because it becomes relevant. My daughter is, and I say this not just as her dad, but as someone who watched her earn it, exceptional. She graduated high school as valedictorian. 4.0 unweighted, 4.3 weighted. National Honor Society. AP classes coming out of her ears. She did all of this while working part-time at a frozen yogurt place 15 hours a week because she wanted her own, spending money, and didn't want to ask me for it. She got accepted to her top choice university with a partial scholarship. Not full ride, but the scholarship plus what I'd been saving in her 529 since she was born would cover most of tuition. We need loans for the rest, but manageable ones. I've been putting $200 a month into that 529 for 17 years. That was non-negotiable money, even when things were tight. Now, my wife. When we first started dating, she was great with my daughter. Patient, warm. She'd help with homework, take her shopping, the whole nine. I thought I'd found someone who understood that my daughter was the priority. That was the deal from day one. I told her on our third date, my kid comes first. Always. If that's a problem, I understand, but I need to know now. She said it wasn't a problem. She said she'd always wanted to be part of a family. Things started shifting about a year into the marriage. Small stuff at first. She'd make comments about how much time I spend at my daughter's school events. She'd sigh when I helped with college application essays in the evenings. She started referring to my daughter as your daughter instead of by her name. That switch was subtle, but I noticed. Then a money conversation started. She felt I was over-investing in my daughter's education. She thought the 529 contributions should stop now that we were married and had shared financial goals. She wanted to renovate the kitchen, which, fair, it needed updating, and thought that $200 a month should go toward that instead. I said no. The 529 was established before we got married. It was funded entirely from my income, and it wasn't changing. She brought it up probably 8 times over 2 years. My answer never changed. About 6 months before graduation, things got noticeably worse. My daughter was deep into college prep, applications, scholarship essays, AP exam studying. She was stressed and needed support. I was spending a lot of evenings helping her review essays or just being available when she needed to decompress. My wife started calling it obsessive. She said I was too enmeshed with my daughter. She actually used that word, enmeshed. She'd read some article online and decided it applied to us. I told her that being an involved parent to a kid who lost her mom at 6 is an enmeshment. It's parenting. She didn't like that answer. 2 months before graduation, my wife told me she wanted us to skip the ceremony and do something as a couple instead. She suggested a weekend trip. I said absolutely not. My daughter was giving the valedictorian speech. I'd watched this kid study until 1 a.m. for 4 straight years. I was going to that graduation if I had to crawl there. She said, "It's just high school. There'll be a college graduation." I told her she was welcome to join me at the ceremony or stay home. Her choice. She chose to come. I wish she hadn't. The ceremony was outdoors, bleachers set up on the football field, white folding chairs for the graduates, a stage with a podium. Standard stuff. It was hot, like unreasonably hot. Everyone was fanning themselves with the programs. We sat in the 4th row. I got in there early to get good seats. My wife complained about the heat the entire time we were waiting. "This is miserable. How long is this going to take? I can't believe there's no shade." I ignored it. I was too focused on scanning the rows of caps and gowns trying to find my kid. The ceremony started. Principal spoke. Some school board members spoke. Then they announced the valedictorian. My daughter walked to the podium. She looked out the crowd, found me, and smiled. This huge, genuine, nervous smile. She had index cards, but her hands were shaking a little. She started her speech, and it was, "Look, I'm her dad, so I'm biased, but it was beautiful." She talked about resilience. She talked about her mom, briefly, just a line about the people who loved us first and taught us what showing up looks like. Half the audience was tearing up. I was gone, full tears, not even trying to hide it. And then she said, "I want to thank my dad, who never missed a single thing that mattered." The crowd applauded. People looked at me. I was a mess. Best moment of my life. My wife leaned over and said, and I will never forget this as long as I breathe, "I'm not clapping for her. She's not even my kid." She said it quietly, but not quietly enough. The woman sitting next to us heard it. I saw her head turn. I looked at my wife. She had her arms crossed, not clapping, while every other person in those bleachers was on their feet. I said, very calmly, "Then leave." She said, "No, I have every right to be here. You have every right to be here and zero interest in being supportive. So leave. You can't make me leave." I stood up. The speech was wrapping up. My daughter was looking down her notes. I leaned down and said, "You can walk out with me right now, or you can sit here and I'll deal with this after. But either way, you're not sitting next to me for the rest of this ceremony." She must have seen something in my face because she stood up. We walked down the bleacher steps while the audience was still clapping for my daughter's speech. A few people noticed. I didn't care. I walked her to the parking lot. She was hissing at me the whole way. "You're embarrassing me. You're choosing her over me again." This is exactly what I'm talking about. I opened Uber on my phone, ordered a ride, and said, "You can wait here or you can call your own ride. But you're not going back in there." She said, "You're really putting me in an Uber? Like I'm some stranger." I said, "You just called my daughter at her own graduation, not your kid. You chose stranger status." The Uber arrived in about 4 minutes. She got in, slammed the door. Gone. I walked back in, found my seat, and watched the rest of the ceremony. Watched my daughter walk across the stage. Stood up and clapped so hard my hands stung. Took about 40 photos on my phone, most of them blurry because my hand was shaking. After the ceremony, my daughter came running over. She hugged me, that full body, teenager who still needs her dad hug, and said, "Where's your wife?" I said, "She wasn't feeling well. She went home." My daughter looked at me for a second. She knew. Kids always know. But she didn't push it. She just said, "Okay, can we get ice cream?" We got ice cream. She ordered a large. I paid. We sat in the car with the AC blasting, and she told me about how she almost dropped her index cards on stage and how the kid behind her in line stepped on her gown. Normal, happy, 18-year-old stuff. Best ice cream of my life. Update 1. The week after, 8 days later. All right, a lot has happened. I need to get this down while it's fresh. When I got home from ice cream with my daughter that evening, my wife was already there, sitting at the kitchen table. She'd clearly been crying, but the vibe wasn't sad. It was angry. The crying had turned to fury by the time I walked in. She immediately started in. "You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. You physically removed me from a public event. People saw you walk me out." I said, "People also heard you say you wouldn't clap for an 18-year-old girl at her own graduation." That was a private comment. It was heard by at least one other person, and it wouldn't matter if nobody heard it. You said it. She then pivoted, and this is where things started getting really ugly. She said that I had never made her feel like part of this family, that my daughter excluded her, that the two of us had an unhealthy dynamic, and she was the outsider looking in. I asked her for a specific example of my daughter excluding her. She couldn't give one. She just kept circling back to feelings. She felt excluded. She felt like a third wheel. She felt like the marriage was secondary to the parenting. I told her, as gently as I could manage at that point, that feelings are valid, but actions have consequences. And refusing to clap for a kid's valedictorian speech was an action. She slept in the guest room that night. I thought maybe space would help. It did not. Over the next few days, the entitlement cranked up to levels I didn't know existed. First, she called her mother and told her a version of events where I dragged her out of the graduation by force and threw her into an Uber. Her mother called me at work, at my job, and left a voicemail saying I was controlling and abusive and that her daughter deserved better than a man who puts his ex-wife's child above his own marriage. My ex-wife. My dead ex-wife. She called my daughter my ex-wife's child. I didn't return the call, but I saved the voicemail because my gut told me to start keeping records. Second, my wife went to my daughter directly. This is the part that made me see red. While I was at work on a Tuesday, my wife sat my daughter down in the living room and told her that she was the reason the marriage was struggling. She told my 18-year-old daughter that if she'd been more welcoming and less clingy with her father, none of this would be happening. My daughter called me at work crying. Not dramatic crying, quiet, trying not to break crying. She said, "Dad, she told me it's my fault." I left work early. I'm talking mid-sentence with a client, told my colleague to cover, walked out. Drove home in 20 minutes. My wife was in the kitchen, cooking like nothing happened. I walked in and said, "Did you tell my daughter that our marriage problems are her fault?" She didn't even look up from the stove. I told her the truth. She needs to hear it eventually. She is 18. She lost her mother at 6. And you just told her she's responsible for adult relationship problems. What is wrong with you? Oh, here we go. Saint daughter can do no wrong. Everyone has to worship at the altar of your precious baby. I took a breath, a long one. Then I said, "I want you to move out." She dropped the spatula. "Excuse me. You heard me. I want you to move out. This is my house too. It's my house. I bought it 7 years before we met. Your name isn't on the deed or the mortgage. You're welcome to consult a lawyer about your rights, but I'm asking you to leave now." And I want to be honest here because I know how this sounds. The house situation is complicated. I bought the house outright before the marriage. It's in my name. She never contributed to the mortgage because there isn't one, but she'd been living there for 5 years, 1 year dating for married, and in our state, that potentially gives her certain residency rights. I couldn't just change the locks. I knew that, but I could ask her to leave voluntarily. She refused. Obviously, I'm not going anywhere. If anyone should leave, it's her. She's 18. She's an adult. She can go live in the dorms early. She wanted me to kick out my daughter, who was about to start college in August, so she could stay in a house she'd never paid a cent of mortgage or property tax on. The audacity was almost impressive. I called a lawyer the next morning. Consultation cost me $350 for the first hour. Worth every penny. Here's what I learned. In our state, divorce would mean she'd potentially be entitled to a portion of marital assets accumulated during the marriage, but the house, being premarital property with no commingling, was likely mine. The 529 was also likely protected since it was established before the marriage and funded solely from my premarital account routing. The lawyer said she'd likely get her share of anything we accumulated jointly during the 4 years, which wasn't much, some furniture, a used car I'd co-signed for her, and about $6,000 in a savings account we'd both contributed to. I filed for divorce 3 days later. When she got served, and this is important, she was at her mom's house for dinner. The process server handed her the papers at her mother's front door. Her mother called me 20 minutes later screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She called me every name in the book and then said, "You'll be hearing from our lawyer." Their lawyer sent me a demand letter within a week. They wanted the house, LOL, half the 529, absolutely not, spousal support for 5 years, and $15,000 in relocation expenses. My lawyer responded with the legal equivalent of "per my last email" and cited the premarital property documentation, the 529's protected status, and the fact that 4 years of marriage with her income level didn't typically warrant long-term spousal support in our state. He said we might end up offering a small transitional support amount to make it go away faster, but the big-ticket items were off the table. She didn't take it well. Update 2. The dirty tricks 3 weeks later. So she escalated. Of course she did. When the legal reality started setting in, that she wasn't getting the house, wasn't getting the 529, and wasn't getting 5 years of spousal support, she pivoted to guerrilla tactics. First, she tried to turn my daughter against me. She started texting my daughter directly. "Your dad is throwing me away. I always try to love you like my own. He's going to do this to you too one day." Manipulation dressed up as vulnerability. My daughter showed me every text. She didn't respond to any of them. She just handed me the phone each time and said, "You should probably see this." Smart kid. I screenshot everything and forwarded it to my lawyer. Then came the mutual friends campaign. My wife started calling every couple we knew and telling them I was divorcing her because she expressed a boundary at graduation. That's how she framed it, a boundary. Refusing to acknowledge my kid's biggest achievement was apparently a boundary now. About half her friends bought it. The other half called me to hear my side. The ones who heard the full story, including the part where she blamed my daughter to her face, were horrified. 2 of them stopped talking to her entirely. The rest tried to stay neutral, which I respected. Not everyone wants to pick sides in someone else's divorce. Then she tried something that genuinely scared me. She called CPS. I need to repeat that so it sinks in. She called Child Protective Services and reported that my daughter was living in an unstable environment with a father who was emotionally volatile and prioritized conflict over his child's well-being. She reported this anonymously, but I knew it was her because the specific language in the report, which the CPS worker read to me during the visit, mirrored things she'd said to me verbatim. Enmeshed, unhealthy dynamic. Her vocabulary. The CPS visit lasted about 45 minutes. The caseworker was professional and thorough. She talked to me, talked to my daughter separately, looked at the house. My daughter, remember, is a straight-A valedictorian heading to a top university, told the caseworker plainly, "My dad is the best parent I know. His wife is angry about the divorce, and this is retaliation." The caseworker closed the case that same day. No findings. But let me tell you something. Having CPS show up at your door is one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. For about 30 seconds, I stood in my own living room wondering if someone could actually take my kid because a vindictive woman made a phone call. I told my lawyer about the CPS report. He was pissed, not at me, at her. He said a retaliatory false report could actually work against her in the divorce proceedings. It showed a pattern of escalation and willingness to weaponize systems against me. He documented everything. Meanwhile, my wife had moved in with her mother. She wasn't paying anything toward the house or the bills, which was fine because I'd been covering them alone for most of the marriage anyway. But she started demanding I continue paying her car insurance. The car was a used Honda that I'd co-signed the loan for. She was making the payments, but I was on the insurance as the primary policyholder because it was cheaper that way. I called the insurance company and removed her from my policy. Gave her 30 days notice, which was more than required. She called me screaming. How am I supposed to get to work? I told her to get her own policy. She said she couldn't afford it. I said that sounded like a her problem. Cold? Maybe. But this is a woman who called CPS on me. Sympathy budget depleted. Now here's the satisfying part. And I mean genuinely satisfying. Not revenge fantasy satisfying. Real, practical. This is what happens when you overplay your hand satisfying. Her lawyer's demand letter, the one asking for the house, the $529, 5 years of support, and $15,000 in relocation, was so aggressive that my lawyer used it against her. In the divorce mediation, we opted for mediation first to try to keep costs down. My lawyer presented timeline. The timeline showed her refusal to support my daughter, the graduation incident, her blaming my daughter directly, the voicemails from her mother making derogatory comments about my deceased wife, the manipulative text to my daughter, the false CPS report, and the absurd demand letter. Every piece documented. Dates, times, screenshots, voicemails saved as audio files, the CPS closure letter. The mediator looked at this package and then looked at her lawyer. Her lawyer looked at the table. He knew. They'd overplayed, and now the documented pattern of behavior was all laid out under fluorescent lights in a conference room. The mediator recommended no spousal support beyond 6 months of transitional payments at a reduced amount. The house stays with me. The $529 is untouched. The savings account gets split 50/50ths. She keeps the Honda. I eat the remaining balance on the co-signed loan, which was about $4,200, just to cut the financial tie cleanly. Her lawyer recommended she accept. She didn't want to. She argued in the mediation room for another hour. She cried. She said I was throwing her away like garbage. She said she'd given 4 years of her life to this family. The mediator listened patiently and then said, very calmly, "The terms being offered are generous given the documented conduct." That sentence broke something in her. She signed. Total cost of the divorce for me: about $8,500 in legal fees, 6 months of transitional support at $800 per month for $1,800, and the $4,200 car loan payoff. Call it roughly $17,500 all in. Not nothing. It hurt financially. I picked up extra service calls on weekends for a few months to offset it. But it was done. Update 3, where things landed 6 weeks later. A lot of people asked for a final update, so here it is. The divorce was finalized 5 weeks ago. It was anticlimactic, honestly. You sign papers. A judge stamps them. You walk out of a courthouse and the sun is still shining and people are still going about their day and nobody knows your whole life just got restructured in a room with bad coffee. My daughter started college in August. Move-in day was chaos in the best way. I rented a minivan because her dorm stuff wouldn't fit in my truck. We made 2 Walmart trips. She bought a mini fridge. I assembled a bookshelf that came with instructions in 3 languages, none of them helpful. I met her roommate, who seemed nice and slightly terrified, which is the correct emotional state for a freshman. When it was time to leave, we stood in the hallway outside her room, and she said, "Dad, thank you for everything." I said, "You did the work. I just drove." She hugged me. Long. The kind of hug where you can feel someone trying to memorize the moment. Then she pulled back and said, "I know what happened at graduation. I know she said she wouldn't clap for me. The woman next to you guys told her daughter, who goes to my school, who told me." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. She said, "I want you to know that I heard you stand up. I was at the podium, and I heard you get up and walk her out. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew you were protecting me. I've always known. I'm a 44-year-old man who works on HVAC systems for a living, and that sentence put me on the floor. Not literally, but emotionally. I held it together until I got to the minivan. Then I sat in the parking lot for about 15 minutes doing that thing where you breathe really carefully so you don't completely fall apart in a Walmart rental. As for my ex-wife, she's still at her mom's house. I hear things through the grapevine because our social circles overlapped. She's been telling people the divorce was my fault, that I was emotionally unavailable and chose my daughter over the marriage. Some people believe her. Some don't. I've stopped caring which camp people fall into. The people who matter know the truth. Her mother still sends me occasional texts, mostly passive-aggressive stuff. I hope you're happy now. She deserved better. I blocked her about 3 weeks ago. Should have done it sooner. The CPS thing still bothers me. Not because anything came of it, the case was closed, done, gone, but because she was willing to do that. She was willing to call a government agency and try to flag me as a bad parent because she was angry about a divorce. That tells me everything I need to know about who she is. Not someone who made a mistake. Someone who, when she felt cornered, reached for the most destructive weapon she could find and aimed. It had a kid who'd already lost her mother. I don't forgive that. I'm told by well-meaning people that forgiveness is for me, not for her. Maybe. I'm not there yet. I might not get there. I'm okay with that. Financially, I'm stabilizing. The transitional support payments end in 4 months. The car loan is paid off. My daughter's first semester is covered between the scholarship and the 529. We'll need some federal loans starting sophomore year, but the payments will be manageable. I'm picking up fewer weekend calls now and actually had a Saturday off last week where I did nothing. Just sat on the porch, drank a beer, and watched the neighbor's dog chase a squirrel for 20 minutes. It was incredible. My daughter calls me twice a week, Tuesdays and Sundays. She tells me about her classes, her roommate's questionable taste in music, the dining hall food ranking system she's created, pizza, B+ salad bar, C- breakfast burritos, offensive. She sounds happy, busy, like she's exactly where she's supposed to be. Last Sunday she called and told me she's thinking about pre-law. She said, and I swear this is a direct quote, "I watched your lawyer dismantle that entire situation with just a folder of evidence, and I thought I could do that." I told her she'd be terrifying in a courtroom. She said, "Thanks, Dad. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." I think about the graduation sometimes. Not the bad part, the moment before it. when she was standing at that podium with her index cards, looking out at the crowd, finding me in the fourth row. That smile. The nervous, proud, look at me, Dad smile. I was there. I was clapping. I was the loudest person in those bleachers. And that's all that matters.